Okay, let's reconvene the meeting. We have a number of updates that have been provided to us in order to help with our deliberations this morning. These are based on questions that were provided by members of committee at the last meeting last Wednesday night. So the first, are you going to take us through? Okay. So Mike is going to take us through these reports, and we'll go from there.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just to give a little bit of a recap in terms of where we were a few nights ago. You'll recall at that meeting on Wednesday that Finance and myself gave an overview in terms of where were we at, how the capital budget process was going to work. Some of the items contained within that update focused on some of the pressures, a planning approach in terms of life cycle costing and risk assessment, and then each of the departments provided presentations looking at mitigation efforts, looking at what were some of the major projects within each of the departments, and then we took a broader Q&A. At that time, it was also requested that the library come and provide an update from a capital perspective. And so before I get into addressing the questions that and the information updates that you have before you, you have before you a project sheet that highlights some of the technology items that the library is seeking. So I'll turn it over to Jill if she has any comments in terms of kicking that off, and then we can get into a Q&A on the library, followed by I will then take you through items 2 through 9.
Okay, and just let's follow for these reports the same as we did on Wednesday night, and that is the merits or lack thereof. Let's avoid that. Let's just make sure that we're clear on what it is that's been presented to us. So go ahead, Jill.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last meeting, Council requested a breakdown of our technology budget, so I've provided that for you. We're looking at updating the staff computers at Beamsville, and then replacing our servers. They were to be replaced last year, but we thought that it would be a good idea to get another year of life out of them. So we've brought this forward to 2017 instead of 2016.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McMillan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the questions that always comes up when we're talking about this is that the library system is entirely divorced from the town system. And can we hear your rationale for that kind of operation? And from Mr. Brown, possibly about the other side of that, or whether it stays as a separate unit or whether it becomes just folded into the town system.
We have looked at it from a cost perspective, and we think it is very economically feasible to keep it within the library. We contract out our IT support to a company. Looking at the amount of cost it is, we worked it out to be a 0.2 FTE, which I think is very reasonable, given the cost that we have every year for that support. We're also looking at other things, like, for example, and I may not be correct on this, but I think that if we for example, if we do go to to using the town servers, we'd have to upgrade the internet connectivity at the Vineland Library, and that would cost 4 times as much as we're paying today. I took a look at that cost and the cost of the servers. It actually worked out that was 60 years within the life of the servers, or even a little bit more. It would be actually more to do it that way. So those are a couple of the things that we had looked at. So it's looking that it is very cost effective, because they said there's really no cost savings. There may be some other type of savings that John Brown may be able to tell us, but looking strictly on cost, it is cost effective.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, through you to Jill. Have you got a breakdown of those costs in regards to the cost of the upgrade of the internet connectivity at Vineland as opposed to, you're throwing out 4 times, and
Yeah,
I'd like
well,
to have a sort of a
yes.
concrete number on that.
Right now, our internet connectivity we're paying $120 a month. My understanding, if we go to NRBN, it would be $400 to $500 per month. So that's certainly one thing, and given the current traffic at Vineland, I don't believe that type of connectivity is necessary.
Okay, sorry. Through you, if I might, Mr. Chair, what sort of service are we getting provided for $130 a month? You said 130, right?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we are getting the Cogeco Business plan.
Which is what, from a download and upload perspective?
Oh, I don't have that at my fingertips, but I don't have that.
Okay.
I do have it in
Okay.
another report.
I'd be interested to be comparing apples to apples, so if that's possible to get for us, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this report to Ms. Nicholson? Seeing none, thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Next report, Mr. CAO. Carry on projects? No, carry forward projects.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be as succinct as possible going through each of these items, but I know this one generated a lot of questions, and so I'll probably take a little bit more time on this one. At Wednesday's initial budget meeting, we spoke about, and there were a lot of inquiries around the carry forward projects. There were 6 that were identified when staff did an analysis. They were Fire Station 2, the Beamsville Lions Park Washroom and Fieldhouse, the Prokich Park Design and Construction Phase 1, Serena Drive Neighborhood Park Design, the Skateboard Park Site Selection and Design, and the 13th Street EA. Councillor McMillan had inquired in terms of Fire Station 2. As you'll see from the description there, that is a $1.36 million project. We have finalized as of late August with Bethesda the purchase of the property, and through both Director Hussein and Chief Hudson finalizing the needs. The RFP for design and construction will be issued next Friday tentatively as per our schedule at this point. I can stop after that one, take any questions if there are any questions, or I can continue. Moving forward to Prokich Park. When we look at Prokich Park, I think what we tried to do is take an approach where we looked at the scope of work. There were some high-level, descriptions, high-level diagrams provided about 6 years ago. Since that time, things have changed. We had partnered, as I said on Wednesday, with the Niagara region and Caldoon, who was doing some other urban design master planning work for that park, and that occurred late in the spring. The park, as you see there, should be one of the prototypical parks. It's a large park in our community, and what we're hoping to do is, outside of a broader parks, recreation, and open space master plan, but using the same principles, move forward with this particular park. That RFP, similar to the one for Camden, is set to go out next Friday as well. Moving forward, the Beamsville Lions, sorry, are there any questions? No. Moving forward, the Beamsville Lions Park Washroom and Fieldhouse. I think briefly I spoke to that again on Wednesday. In light of the regional bid for the 2021 games, we have delayed moving forward as it relates to anything on that. And when I say delay, that is not that we're not ready to issue that RFP once we hear back from the 2021 games in spring of 2017, but there will be additional funds available, and I think what we want to do is ensure that the design is appropriate, that we're leveraging any of the funds that are available, so that if we are successful with that particular bid, that any of the monies that we have in terms of design monies are leveraged using the monies that the 2021 games will be providing to us both through the federal, provincial, and regional governments. Moving forward to both Serena and the skateboard park site selection and design, starting with Serena. Staff understand the significance of the Serena Drive Neighborhood Park, its location within the fairgrounds, and the importance of moving that park forward. There have been a number of, I think, iterations and conversations as it related to that park. Would it be the park that would house potentially a skateboard park, a bike pump track? We had talked about an outdoor skating rink. We had talked about additional needs at the Fleming Center. So I think when we look at all of these, what staff are recommending as it relates to the Serena Drive Neighborhood Park design is that it become part of the broader parks, recreational, and open space master plan. I think what we need to do is we look at parks across the broader community and look at the needs across the broader community, is ensure that we determine what parks are required where, what amenities are required in those parks, looking at things like skateboard parks, looking at things like splash pads within those parks. And so what we're recommending is that the open space parks and recreation master plan begin in January. It likely is going to take us 3 to 4 months to have that completed, and immediately following that, be ready to issue the Serena Drive neighborhood park design. Alternatively on that, and I know staff have had this conversation, outside of the parks master planning process, we can definitely issue the RFP. It is ready to go, but I think looking at it holistically across the entire footprint of the municipality is probably a better and more prudent approach. So before I move to the skateboard park, I can take some questions on that.
So, Councillor Ojima?
The question I had was just answered, and that's regarding an RFP for that process, so thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Oh, Councillor McMillan?
Just to be sure of the timeline, is that starting in January, that the master plan could be completed within 3 or 4 months, so that getting into the summer months, we can go back to the community and with that. And the reason I want to emphasize that is because we've got a section of our population that is just waiting and waiting and waiting for this to happen. And we need to go to the community and say that this is the plan that we have, and it's not going to be years and years before this is going to happen, but it is imminent.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the one comment that the master plan will allow us to do is look at within that precinct. I think about Meadowwood Park that is nearing completion. I think about the work along Conkle Creek that's going to happen there. I think about the stormwater management pond that's there, and I think some of the amenities we want to do there, which is not too far from Serena. So we want those parks to be complementary. We want to share whatever monies are invested in that particular park, which absolutely, I think one of the things I've heard in the last 10 months since starting is let's move forward with Serena Park. It's perfectly situated. It is prime for park amenities and becoming a neighborhood park. But I think what staff are recommending is just ensuring that the park at Meadowwood and the park at Serena are complementary to one another in terms of the amenities that we provide at those parks.
I absolutely agree. I think that's important, but the point is, I don't want this to go into years away, that the information that is going out to the community through this is that it is imminent. It will happen in a shorter period of time.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just speak on that one particular point, I think what we need to do is ensure we've got a robust communication plan around that particular park in that particular location, and ensuring that we are providing timelines to the community. And I think looping back with residents, whether that be through direct mailouts or just generally through the media, what's happening at that particular park.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Councillor McMillan that we're now 3-4 years down the road from the Fleming Center being complete and the Serena Park sitting there as a piece of lawn. And I understand that the challenges that we've had resource-wise as far as moving some of these forward. I guess my question would be, how do we also include the public on this sort of RFP or this master plan project, and how do we communicate to them that something is happening? That there is a plan. There is this hasn't been forgotten, especially Prokich Park. I can hear Councillor Pachariva going on about Prokich Park, and how do we now communicate that we're still probably a year away from shovel in the ground, because I would think that we have to do the master plan, and then we have to do an individual design for each one of those parks, so it's going to take some time.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, let me tackle the question around Prokich Park first. As I said, that will be, I think what we can do on that particular one, again, to demonstrate to the community that we are moving forward. We do have a design on that particular park, something that was generated with the region. I think we should come back, present to committee what that design looks like, what are the features of that design, how we've incorporated conversations with the Prokich family in terms of Mrs. Prokich and the legacy that she left in the community. I think demonstrate visually to folks that things are moving forward. And similarly on Serena, I think if we start communicating what that timeline is and why we want to, take the approach of having a broader parks master plan, I think residents will understand that. Cognizant, you're right, people want to see things happen in that particular location. I can tell you this is, priority number one once the master plan is complete, having this RFP issued for design and moving forward on this. And I think extensive public consultation in terms of what people want to see in that particular area. But yeah, I take your comment. We need to start demonstrating that we're making some incremental steps on this particular park.
Mayor Easton?
Mr. Chairman, the comment that I would make is relative to some of the changes that we saw over the last year in regard to what the art of the possible is with a skate park, not versus a bike pump, but the conjoining of those two concepts, and going back to the core principle of getting a return on investment that gives you the widest community involvement. And certainly the bike pump does that because it allows the smallest children on their little bikes to, and their Strider bikes to get out there and play with other people. And it's not just a skate park, which we realize now that it doesn't encompass a large cross-section of population. And so, I think that Lincoln has always tried to get the biggest bang for its buck. And I mean, like the rest of you, I'm very impatient to see these three get going because it has gone on for such a long time. But it looks like we've got a plan here. I just want to throw out that one of the initiatives that VRIC is involved in is in terms of tree planting and improving the canopy in our area. I think it's another resource for that. And I know that Director Hussain certainly had additional tree plantings in mind when he was looking at the core, that sort of basic list of what ought to be in a park, besides having respectable looking benches and garbage containers, which, I mean, really, we were down to the bottom, I think, in terms of those basic amenities. They just were not there. So certainly by the end of this term, we should have some very good work done in all these areas. And I'm really pleased to hear that we're all pushing in the right direction.
Okay. Go ahead, Diane.
Just a little further to what Mayor Easton was just saying about, and this is getting into a little bit more detail than we should be talking about today, but it's on my mind because I was just talking with the CAO about the trip to Holland, and one of the higher level looks at our Center of Excellence in Agriculture also ties into stormwater management and absorption. So when we design these parks, we want to make sure that we have a lot of green space in there for that reason as well, not only for recreational reasons. And so, thank you.
Okay, next. Skateboard park. So you want to briefly talk about that as well?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think the Mayor touched on it. As we look at the skateboard park site selection and design, we did undertake a community engagement effort through a survey and talking to individuals, looking at where they would want that skateboard park. I think we did provide council a high-level overview that I think what was coming out of that survey was Hillary Bald was the preferred location. But again, before moving forward on a skateboard park, I think another comment that came forward was around how do you have a multi-purpose site? How do you incorporate the bike pump track, as the mayor highlighted? And so I think similarly, before we decide that Hillary Bald, based on that public consultation, is the correct park, go forward with a master plan type effort, move it forward quickly, knowing that there's some potential opportunities with both the skateboard park and the bike pump track. I think another thing, looking at cycling and the bike pump track, there aren't a lot within the Niagara region. There's only a few in the broader Golden Horseshoe region, and so I think we saw that as a potential opportunity. So similarly, that master plan RFP will be issued in January, and immediately following that, I think, if I look at 1 and 2, those two efforts, both with Serena Drive and the skateboard park site selection and design, are the top 2.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and if I can put my BIA hat on for a minute, consideration around building out the downtown core, and is there an opportunity here at Serena Park that we want to explore, especially thinking about where some of the development is coming, south of the downtown, that if we build a more central location out, do we now let those folks also come into the downtown core? So just a thought around location and how are we building out attractions to bring people into downtown.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think on that point, I think one of the things that when we do engage an individual or an organ or a group that is going to undertake that master plan is to look at our recreational assets that we've got. I think the Fleming Center is one of those recreational assets. People are coming to that particular location. It's centrally located. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. I think there's a public consultation component of it. And so, I think as we move forward and develop a broader master plan for that, for those 2 locations and for parks and open space and recreational amenities across the community, we definitely need to look at it and create, some of those similar clusters where we can kind of co-locate investments.
To the group, you're getting down in the weeds here pretty much, so,
Right.
and this should be stuff for committee work with SRC, so if we want to continue in the weeds, that's great, but otherwise, go ahead, Diane. Yeah, go ahead.
Then mine was a weed question, but can I ask while we're talking about that, when, do we have another capital? Is the next one supposed to be capital, or is this the last capital? And when are we going to discuss merits?
We're going to be discussing them immediately after these reports are
Okay,
done,
gotcha.
so-
Thanks.
so.
And this is the last capital one scheduled? Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor. While this is the last official meeting, I think what we're trying to do this year as we look at budget is take the direction that comes out of this meeting, start presenting you the operating budget, look at those things in totality, and then I think when we're completing those 2 presentations and the deliberations that go along, come back to you for more of a final reconciliation, so to speak, of what we're looking at from a budget increase.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering what our schedule is so we can stick to it, but that makes complete sense.
The hope is today and why we scheduled the Saturday. In fact, you were the champion of that. So the reality is that we want to be able to have the capital tucked away as best we can, unless there's significant operational issues that come into play afterwards, right?
Good. Good.
So, okay. 13th Street EA.
So this one's short and sweet. I'm assured that this one will be issued in the next 2 weeks. So unless there's any questions, I can move forward with the subsequent report. And as always, SMT is here to answer any particular questions relative to the details of any of these items. Through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely not. I mean, we're I don't mind you asking a lot of questions. That's what this opportunity is here for. So by all means, get in the weeds.
Mr. Chairman, if we could just have a quick, Sorry. What I want to know is when the public will be engaged in this, because there's going to be a lot of farmers in that area that are going to be wanting to have input into this. If we need to do it, then we need to get it on the list. But if they are not, if they're not hot to trot, so to speak, on this one, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time. So what stage are the community involved?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Mayor, I'm going to let Director Graham answer that question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, so the start of the EA process, we're going to engage the community for consultation. We're likely anticipating probably late winter. Early spring, we'll be reaching out with a PIC and sharing with the community what our options are with the whole current road closure on 13th Street.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, just as a follow-up then, I think that that's too late. We have to get these farmers involved at a time of the year when they're not thinking about what their next crop is going to be. And I can't tell you what that is, but we certainly have people that we can get out there and ask questions of, you know, what's the best time to do it? I don't know why we would wait until the late year. We've got to engage them when they have nothing else on their minds. Otherwise, we're going to have the same argument all the time that we're coming out and asking them questions when it's not convenient for them. So that's the only comment that I would have to make. I mean, I know the process will be very wholesome and fulsome. There's no question about that. But we can't go to them when they've got other things on their plate.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Mayor's point, I mean, if there's some things that we can do concurrently, I know Dave and his folks will make sure that we undertake that. So if there's some concurrent engagement that we can do of that particular group, then we will ensure that we're doing that so as we don't lose any time.
Councillor Bernay.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I don't want to get in the weeds, but I think it's very important that a lot of these things that we're talking about here in terms of these RFPs that are coming forward all fall under SRC. We all know, you know, the director of SRC is not here today. I want to make sure that, you know, a lot of the things that we're talking about, whether it's Councillor McMillan saying, you know, we don't want this thing to be going into the future because there's a lot of people watching what we're doing. So I'm asking that the chair of SRC and the CAO are very cognizant that, you know, we're about to celebrate some small victories, whether it's the Scout Hut. I had heard through Director Hussain that we were going to put up some bike racks in the downtown core before the end of the year. So I think those are great opportunities for us to show the people that we are listening and that we are doing things. To Mayor Easton's point, in the spring, there's no reason why we can't be putting, you know, proper garbage cans and some benches in those parks as we prepare with this master plan. So I think we're missing an opportunity if we don't recognize that over the next, before the end of the year, that we can celebrate some of those victories.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely, Councillor. You know, I think as you've heard me say often, I think incremental is not a bad word. We need to ensure that we are incrementally making some visible and visual impact so that residents, you know, see what we're doing and, you know, continue to support the investments that we're seeking, you know, through the budget process.
Mayor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, I would just, this may not be completely relevant in terms of the bare bones of discussing budget, but it is the responsibility of council to keep their eye on the relative condition of projects going forward. And we know the condition of the work plan. There's no issue with that. But we have a situation that we're dealing with right now in terms of SRC where if we don't keep our eye on some of these projects, it will be difficult for us to know what the status is. And so I don't want to, through you, Mr. Chairman, to start operationalizing our thinking around sport, recreation, and culture. But clearly, a lot of our agenda right now hinges on success in that area. So at some point in the future, a mechanism, when Mr. Kirkopoulos comes and brings us his new plan when we're into the operating budget, I think that Councillor Brunet's point is very well taken. We have to keep our eye on this because, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there's going to be a big disappointment if we don't. And it's not because the staff aren't paying attention, but when you look at the myriad of priorities that we're dealing with, it's going to be easy to get off track, very easy. So I don't, I'm going to rely entirely on the CAO to be bringing that forward to us. I guess, you know, having spoken about it now, I think we're doing our job to make sure that we want to see outcomes, and we want to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And if there's issues around not being able to achieve something, then let's talk about that, get it on the table, and council will make a decision. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I will endeavor both operationally as well as communicatively to ensure that we are sharing this information, both with the public and as well making sure council has regular project updates as we move forward. And I hear you loud and clear about, ensuring some things get done, some visual things get done.
Okay. Are there any other reports that we have, even verbal, at this point, to add to what you've just presented?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, as it relates specifically to any of the carry forward projects, no. So if there isn't any additional kind of overarching questions, I'll move on to the others.
Very good.
The next one is the government relations update. You'll recall that this was both presented and distributed to you at the Committee of the Whole on October 24th. At the last budget meeting, the Mayor had a particular, question around, and maybe more of a comment, just suggesting that we remain focused and vigilant on ensuring that we are applying for and ensuring, we can continue to secure as many opportunities through senior levels of government. So this report simply lays out both the federal applications that are before the province or before the federal government, the provincial applications, the two largest ones being the Clean Community Water and Wastewater Fund, as well as a number of Ontario 150 applications, with a large one for the Jordan Arena renovations. And then again, moving forward, some smaller ones around Canada 150, Ontario 150, the Places to Grow Implementation Fund, a Town of Lincoln Brock University joint grant application around engagement in the rural urban development planning field, as well as an OSIF application for the QEW Victoria Water Main Crossing. So if there isn't any questions, I can move forward. So.
Concerning the information, go ahead.
Yep. I was reading that the federal infrastructure money was going to be increased to $81 billion in 2017. Is there anything that we need to do to get on top of that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Regima's question, I think we just need to ensure that we remain, incredibly aware, incredibly connected to the grant programs that are being announced. Right now, there was, in that initial phase, $48 billion that was suggested, specifically focusing, at least in phase one, on transit and wastewater, water type projects. We don't necessarily qualify for transit. However, looking at our operating budget and council's desire to have a pilot project around transit, and the amount of money that pilot project would consider, my hope is that there will be some grant opportunities as it relates to that, similar to what some other municipalities in the Niagara region have been able to secure. So I think it's just, continue to ask us, both publicly and privately, continue to remind us. It's a conversation that SMT continues to have. I know we've put extensive effort into the recent applications that are before you here, and my hope is, I'm fairly optimistic that we'll be successful with at least a few of them, if not all of them.
Clarification question, Mr. Chair, if that's all right. The transit opportunities, what I was reading, it looked like the money is only to go to sort of upgrades of existing transit systems. So is there any opportunity for us out of that, do you think, in the fine wording?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe as it relates to the federal program, it really is, some of it's higher order transit, some of it's for the purchase of large scale buses where there's existing transit systems in place. But because we're only talking about a pilot project that for 2017 is looking at, $50,000, I mean, it's not a huge amount of money when you look at the type of money being given. So I think if we can make a compelling business case around why we're looking at transit, about establishing a transit system, about starting to change mindsets within the community that transit is a mode of transportation that makes sense. I think tying it to seniors, tying it to some of the other things around active transportation, there could be an opportunity to secure what really is a small fraction of money when you look at the broader envelopes that both the provincial and federal governments have.
So the argument could be made. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Easton and then Councillor McPherson.
Mr. Chairman, what I had in mind around this whole business of government relations and revenue was that politically we need to round out our sources of revenue. And they can't, of course, always rely on the levy, and that, the current situation would dictate that the levy will continue to go up to a certain extent each year, and we try to do that according to the CIP. However, I'm looking for revenue to be more of an expectation as opposed to a if it happens, it happens. And I think that the staff have proven that they have the ability, albeit it's a huge additional load for them. But they've proven that they can complete these, the quality of application that's required to be competitive. A few lines versus 150 pages of comprehensive justification. And I think that as a council, we should be expecting that that's the way this will be done in the future, that there be a number that is put in the budget that puts some pressure on the system to perform. And if I think the way these projects have been approached this year is sound, they will be done pending the receipt of. But it puts them on the agenda and makes it clear that we have an expectation. We can't control what comes to us, but we can certainly control the quality of those submissions. And I think our staff have proven that they've got it in them to do it through Mr. Kirkopoulos' leadership, and I would like to see a number in there that is that's realistic. There is a lot of money out there. There's no reason why Lincoln shouldn't be the recipient. So I'll look forward to seeing what that number is, and I think the word I'm looking for falls into a combination of robust and audacious in order for us to achieve. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out that on the issue of transit, in the meeting that we had at the region on Monday with MP Badaway, that it was specifically directed that the money for build-out needed to be added into the criteria for the transit mandate so that the only recipients wouldn't be the large transit companies. So his advice to us was that we have a comprehensive plan on a Niagara region scale, and that go forward so that we can be more competitive. And that was well received by those in attendance, and I believe that that's what the future endeavors will encompass. Thank you.
It would be good if we have a more fulsome discussion as a council on that as well, because that's coming as news to me as well as others. So,
Yeah, it just happened on Monday.
Yeah. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair Foster, and very well said, Mary Easton. And that was, part of my question is, there's some serious money in here, and I mean, if you look at the tax levy that we have, we could more than surpass the tax levy just with a couple of these wins here. So, how do we stay on purpose? How do we make this part of our revenue every year? And I guess the question through to the CAO is there responsibility within the staff? Is this potentially ECDEV, that we are looking at more or less an ownership piece that does look out for these opportunities for us? And does this become a part of what we're doing? If we look at what's going on federally and provincially now, I think we're kind of turning a corner as far as the economy is concerned, and there's probably going to be more money available over the next 5 years. we want to make sure that we're aggressively pursuing all we can.
So in order to help a little bit here, I'm going to give Mike the last say on this at this point so we can move on, because we're kind of getting into a differing topic area of discussion at this point. So go ahead, Mike.
Through Mr. Chairman, thank you. So 2 comments. In terms of just how we're tackling these internally, usually it's a staff team that we've put together. Some of the projects are different, and so they're relying on some of the subject matter experts. For instance, some of these projects are public works related projects, and so Dave and his team play a big part of those applications. I think part of my goal is also involving some of our managers. I think about Adam Alcock within the water group, ensuring that we're starting to create that succession and that opportunity for others to get involved. But I think our goal is, where we need to ensure that we are pulling in, if there are, outside resources, experts that specialize in these particular grants, then I think it doesn't hurt us to go in that direction. Right now, is there a dedicated staffer? There is not. I think it's a combination between, my office, I think finance, I think communications will play a role moving forward. In some municipalities, yeah, absolutely. It is kind of that ECDEV role, and it morphs and it becomes revenue generation, it becomes seeking grants, it becomes that advocacy. I think another big point of this is we need to, I think, work better with council. I think the advocacy that happens really needs to happen politically. I think about whether it be, Councillor Foster from an AMO perspective or an OSIM perspective, whether it be working with FCM, whether it be working with some of the other MPs and MPPs in our particular area and outside of our boundaries, ensuring that we are making some deliberate efforts to go to Queen's Park, to have these conversations. There's things that staff can do, from a staff to staff perspective, but I think oftentimes what is more helpful is ensuring that political to political, those conversations are happening. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to, I think, revisit our government relations strategy, which was a very good high-level strategy, but as we specifically look at these particular pockets, ensuring that we are involving agencies that have advocacy power like AMO, that can do it on a broader scale, and as well, utilizing the expertise that we have around the council table.
Dave, I did see your hand, but do you have anything to add on top of what Mr. Kirkopoulos just stated?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to actually go down the more directly focused staff person to really champion this. I mean, if we see it as a viable source of revenue from a moving forward standpoint, then dedicating resources to it is definitely something that's a worthwhile investment considering the magnitude of the available funds. So.
And we'll give Mike the final comment on this.
No, through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I appreciate the support that I think, council's demonstrating on this one. I think the only challenge sometimes we face with these grant programs is there's an ebb and flow to them. So I think, if we need to bring in part-time resources that help assist us, and especially ones that are based on performance, I'm going to suggest, the securing of these funds is critical, and they pay for themselves. If we bring people in, but you want to see success. I don't suspect you're just going to write a blank check to FTEs to ensure that we're doing good government relations. And while that's, I think, a nice to have, we definitely need to demonstrate some quick wins on this particular initiative, and then demonstrate to council that we can continue down that path if you make that investment.
Next report is the UPS backup batteries and generators. Very good report, by the way.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn that over to John Brown to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the last couple of days, we've compiled a report for council in order to better assist you in decision making for items number 33 and number 37. This report shows that all of our generators are designed to handle about 120% of the load buildings are expected to put out in case of an emergency or disaster. So our generators are well sized for their use. As well, all of our core computing underlying components, servers and switching are protected by battery backups. If you look at page 2 and 3, you'll note that those particular batteries servicing the computers are good anywhere from 10 minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on function and draw. Really, for all intents and purposes, these batteries are designed to bridge the gap between losing grid power and the generators themselves starting up to provide continuous power. That means that we're not designed to run without a generator for any extended period of time. Should the generators fail, our UPS, which is our battery backups, are smart enough to send a signal to the computers and servers themselves to start a graceful shutdown process, which means that the servers will shut themselves down as a defense mechanism against pulling the power quickly, which could result in data corruption or data loss. If there's any additional questions, please let me know.
Councillor Thompson, but I'm actually just a quick comment. You and I should have a chat somewhere along the line. One of the failures we had at our place was based on a switch dropping as opposed to the outside world power going away, and it caused all sorts of grief. So anyway, I want to talk to you about that because I want to make sure that that's covered off in the way that your whole UPS and generator process is working. So.
For sure. If I can answer that quickly, we operated the 4510 switch, which has dual supervisors, which means we could survive any failure of one component in our switching system and still remain functional when it comes to switching. So it'd be very difficult to knock down the 4510, not impossible, but to have two supervisors fail simultaneously would be a very tough act to follow.
Trust me, it happens.
It's not impossible, I assure you. What we've done is we've tried to build a network that's as resilient as possible. I'm not saying lightning can't strike the building, but it would be very difficult to disable our backbone switching features.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, it's never 100% guaranteed for sure. I just actually wanted to thank John because this actually has given me a very good overview and in good detail of what we've got sitting there, and certainly the way we've got it set up for backup to notify staff of what's going on. And I feel significantly more comfortable. I'm not 100% comfortable because you never are, but certainly as soon as you feel you're 100% comfortable, you got a problem. So.
By the way, I also appreciate our back and forth, John, on the town hall generator and the fact that machine is still in top-notch condition. It's just it's getting long in the tooth, so we do have some flexibility when we're looking at some of those things as well. Mayor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this report, and it certainly gives us a snapshot of one part of our system. However, I just want to make a plea for a committee of the whole in the future to examine the entire IT system. I think it's great that we have a couple of people on council that understand this in depth, but it is absolutely essential that all of us understand what this system looks like, what are the elements, what's the status of each element, so that we have that whole story and we all understand. I think it could very well be why the Fleming Center didn't have a generator. There weren't enough people around the table to really understand the implications of it. It doesn't really matter. We all know why this happened, but. Yeah. But the point I'm making is that we all have to equally understand. We share the responsibility. We have to have the knowledge, and it has to be given to us in a way that we fully understand. And so I just want to make sure that there will be a committee of the whole in the new year to help us deal with that.
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback on that comment from the mayor just a bit in regards to just giving us the opportunity to look at our move forward future planning of our networking. I think it's really good that we as a council know what our redundancy looks like, what the systems are capable of, and the only way for us to do that is to actually have us sit down and get our heads around how this all kind of plays into the bigger picture. So I look forward to that.
Councillor Njima.
comment that I agree. I think I see it, this is all part of our emergency planning. It's really important for us to understand it. Thank you.
Next, paving over Charles Daly Park. Is that what that?
Through Mr. Chairman, not quite. There was a question that came up on Wednesday around the paving project that was identified. It was identified just for the entranceway, and there were some questions around the rest of that particular location. So what you have here is an explanation, without going into without going into all the details here in terms of the effect on stormwater runoff and the existing gravel parking area and allowing water to seep naturally into the ground. We've got, I think, the area that was identified by the mayor in terms of having some issues is an area where there shouldn't be parking occurring, and so I think what we're going to do with that is be, from a bylaw perspective, much more vigilant, ensuring that it's signed appropriately, ensuring that we're monitoring that particular location. And again, before we decide to pave, more of that particular park and more of the entryway and location to where the accessible parking is. This park will also be part of a broader master plan as well as we move forward, and so that collectively we can discuss the vision of Charles Daly Park.
Okay, the next one is the Drake Avenue Neighborhood Reconstruction Project. Burying wires.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So we just wanted to share with the committee what the costs would look like if we were to consider burying the wires on the Drake Avenue Neighborhood Road Reconstruction Project. So when you bury wires, there's a lot of costs involved, both on the public side, on our public road allowance, and there's also a significant cost for each private resident, because we also have to bury the service line from the roadway across people's front yards and to their house, and then reconnect to their electrical panels, breaker panels in their homes. So there's significant work that has to occur on private property, which would typically be at the cost of the residents. So since we don't do works on private property. So when you look at some of those costs for the municipality, we're looking at over $600,000 to bury wires, both hydro and bell wires, on our property, and close to $600,000 would be required to do all the service line bury and connection to people's hydro panels, because there's about 85 homes in that subdivision. And again, that cost would be, the resident would be responsible for their own private property costs. It works out to be about, generally speaking, $7,000 per home to bury their side of the utility. I think the other thing to keep in mind with this too, if we invest in this type of work, it's not even our infrastructure. So this is hydro lines and bell wires. So that's another item to keep in mind. From staff's perspective, we wouldn't recommend doing this. It really doesn't fit with our standards. Just for information, when we reconstruct roads in existing neighborhoods, we don't bury wires, and that's common practice in many other municipalities. When new development is being implemented, the wires are buried. That's the new standard, both from the utility companies and from the municipalities. And at that point in time, it makes a lot of sense because the homes haven't been built yet, so there's an opportunity to bury it right to the home during construction and connect to the hydro panels. So really the only time we would consider burying wires is when we're doing a major project in a downtown area, and it's part of sort of a beautification vision for that area in a commercial district where we try and bury some of the overhead wires or crossings. So staff wouldn't recommend considering this.
I think this is the second example that we've had this term where we've talked about having to retrofit and go back and understanding what the cost truly is, and that's why upfront planning is so critically important as we're going through these types of things. So it's something to be learned for Prudhome's as well. Yes, Councillor Ranjima.
Thank you. I know it's expensive. I've heard that we've been through this a few times, and I talked to Dave at the PIC. It's brutally expensive. It just seems like a shame that there isn't some sort of movement afoot. I mean, from a high-level view, it's very smart to bury them, but it's prohibitively expensive. It's insane. So maybe the CAO maybe there is something we don't know about, some sort of funding, but I haven't heard of anything. But that's crazy expensive. But in the long run, it makes sense from an emergency management perspective, climate change, all of that, to bury them. But who can afford that? We can't. We know that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there isn't any pockets of money or any, opportunities, I think, to go back and to look at existing neighborhoods outside of, looking at the cost and levying for that potential cost. I think when we look at new developments, I think as Dave highlighted, that's really where our opportunity is, and I think there's a lot of research in that area. There's a lot of academic work going in that area. If I think about Brock University, one of the things and one of the research works that they're doing for us around Prudhome's and what that development looks like is, the importance when you look at climate change, when you look at the severity of the storms that we get right now, how there's a long-term cost savings when we bury wires at the beginning of a development. And if you look at, even on average, the life cycle of those wires, should they be damaged during an ice storm, as we had a number of years ago, it more than pays for itself if you're doing it, but you need to really be doing it at the beginning of a project versus coming in and having to retrofit homes. So definitely something that I think staff are incredibly cognizant of, and I think that is really industry and best practice for new developments.
Yes, thank you. It makes sense. It makes sense also to bury them when you're digging up roads and doing what we're doing in the Drake Avenue survey, but it's just too expensive. It's a shame. It's too expensive. Yeah.
Next report is the Prudhome's development. Mayor Easton had asked for some sort of general timelines on this. So, Mike, do you want to take this or pass it to Kathleen?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll probably pass this to Kathleen and Dave. I may have some comments afterwards, but Kathleen can kind of take you through both the 2017 and 10-year capital budget timeframe as it relates to Prudhome's, as well as just how those monies flow. I know there's been a number of questions relative to what is the developer's cost versus the municipality's cost versus the region's cost, and so I think we're prepared to answer those questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to this year's capital budget, there's the Prudhome's water main design, but staff also looked at the 10-year capital budget to identify some of the projects on a go-forward basis. It includes things such as, the park design for the future park. In order to do this design, at some point, the water main will need to be upgraded. The Municipal Service Center, that's the new fire hall that's going to be required between Vineland and Jordan, the construction of that facility, because there will need to be a new fire hall as a result of all of this development, as well as the equipment in that fire hall. As well, as part of, when we get to the subdivision agreement stage, when the development goes ahead, there are some physical works that the developer will have to do. So as an example, in regards to sanitary sewers, there's a lakefront gravity sewer that will have to be constructed. So the developer will have to upfront those costs, and then through the subdivision agreement process, we'll get paid back as development proceeds. There are also some external costs that are going to come into play. There's a number of regional upgrades, the Laurie Avenue pumping station, the Victoria Avenue pumping station, and those may either be funded directly by the developer or through the regional development charges. The region is also updating its development charge study at this time. Depending on how the development proceeds, there may also be some requirements I'm pretty sure there's probably going to be some upgrades to the service road in front of Prudhome's once we urbanize it, and there may be changes to some of their off-ramps and things like that. So that's kind of a summary of some of the costs that are going to occur in regards to Prudhome's. There was also a question in just generally how we deal with development charges. So as development proceeds, whether it's a developer in Prudhome's or whether it's a developer in Beamsville, We do collect development charges at the building permit stage, and all of those funds get, as they're collected, they're put into our development charges fund, and then those development charges funds have sort of sub-funds, for water, storm sewers, park development, et cetera. These funds are used for the town to fund the DC eligible portion of projects. So in the case of, there was a question about the water main project, the cost is approximately $219,000. So that's to be funded by the development charges reserve. So as an example, when the FBH developers develop, whether they develop in Prudhome's or maybe in the next year or so, Beamsville, they're going to be paying development charges. That money that we're collecting from this group of builders and developers is really how we're funding these types of projects. And then essentially any costs that are upfronted by the Prudhome's developer will get paid back over time. So I think it's important to remember that in order to facilitate development, it's really important to have, designs and services in place so development can proceed. And I know one of our goals of our corporate plan is that we have an investment-friendly environment. So just to give you an example, if the town was to issue 100 building permits for residential use, and we use $10,000 per unit, it ranges anywhere from 10 to 14, depending on the type of unit. We could collect, on average each year, $1 million in development charges just from a residential component. As well, when development proceeds, we also get increases in the assessment, which translates into increased taxes. And in addition to, the other thing to keep in mind, that non-residential uses also pay development charges. So any development that happens in the Prudhome's area, it's anticipated there's going to be some commercial development. They're also going to be paying commercial DCs.
Okay, I had Dave and then Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Graham, in regards to the topic marked Other and the Victoria Avenue pumping station. I might be confused, but did we not just cost share upgrades to that with the region? And did they not build it big enough for what's coming?
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman, so we recently cost shared with the Ontario Street pumping station in Beamsville. I know the region has been doing some maintenance works at the Victoria Avenue pumping station in terms of, upgrading maintenance, life cycle items. So, but the one we invested in recently was in Beamsville, Ontario Street.
Okay, I guess just the sight of all that construction down there and hearing that confused me. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, the reason that I asked for this report was because I wanted to ensure that, again, that the whole issue of the servicing of Prudhome's becomes a matter of discussion for Committee of the Whole, Council Business Planning. It is of a scale with such a large number of details that we are not planners and we are not engineers, but we clearly need to be working along with this so that we always understand exactly who's doing what and whether or not there are any hiccups along the way that could put the municipality, I don't want to use the word at risk because I don't think that's really the right word, but it would be, I don't want any surprises. And I'm not sure, because this is very new to us, it may be very clear to the staff and it all looks very clear, but it is not crystal clear to me. And I don't think it's crystal clear to people in the community exactly how this will all lay out. I don't know what kind of a report that Mr. Kirkopoulos could bring forward as part of those discussions, but I just want to make sure that we have that opportunity to see exactly what Kathleen described, which all sounds very logical, if not on paper, at least to see it all laid out and for us to ask all the questions that we need to ask, because this is not going to get easier as we go along. And I don't want to have this feeling that I don't have enough information, or what about this, or what about this? It's not a time to get into the weeds. We have to really understand what that framework is going to look like.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the comment that I'd suggest is that staff come back with a complementary report to, I think, some of the reports that will be coming forward. We're currently in a secondary planning exercise, and you'll be receiving a number of updates on that, but a broader complementary report that I think speaks to roles and responsibilities. What is the role of the municipality? What is the role of the region? Where does the developer fit in this? And just looking at, I think, at a much more higher level and in a simplistic way, not necessarily what are the numbers, but more so what are the principles by which this development will move forward.
So, and just to clarify then with you, Mayor Easton, in the 2017 capital plan, there is the Prudhom's water main upgrade design. I know there's a wide variety of other things, but for the sake of the capital budget process, are you okay with having that item? I mean, it's pretty obvious what it is. Okay, okay.
It's really, this is an opportunity for, to really set up a framework for the future. And absolutely, of course, design work, it's got to be done. This is the time to do it. It's a non-issue. But knowing how that's all going to break down, which is what we get with all of our other projects, is important. But I mean, even from Kathleen's description, even in the 10-year capital budget, there are a lot of ancillary projects that have to go on, and being able to keep a handle on those moving parts is really the job of the staff, but our comfort level has to be there as well. I don't want any surprises, and I don't think anybody else does either.
So, and just to set expectations then, what's realistic? Something towards the spring next year that we can have like a comprehensive report, or what are you thinking? Like, because the reality is that there's a whole bunch of stuff is going to have to go on here before that report is going to be ready, right? So
we're looking at 2018 for the bulk of them, so obviously we've got time.
Okay, good.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, when I suggest complementary, I think we'll time it appropriately with some of the other reports coming, and whether that's the secondary plan, in the first quarter of 2017. So,
Dave, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to the projects that are listed here, and in the spirit of us being enablers in development of this area and whatnot, is there anything that staff sees as things that need to be shifted into more close time periods in order for us to sort of facilitate this process to move along in at the maximum efficiency of getting things done?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think to that question, that will definitely be part of the report we bring forward. But I think, already when we had the middle of this year, the purchase of that particular property, you saw staff looking at what needed to happen, and you saw some of that kind of course correcting or recalibration happen in terms of what year's projects needed to happen. So some of that work is ongoing, but we can ensure that if there is anything that requires moving up, moving around, that we bring that forward when we bring that report forward.
Yeah, I would certainly like to. I mean, if there's anything we need to have in this capital budget that would facilitate that would be, obviously it's not there at this moment, but certainly if there's something comes up, we could probably look at it.
Yeah, well, hence my question on the water main redesign. So, the last report is coming from Mr. Graham, and it's concerning paying mileage versus providing a town vehicle. I think the report is pretty straightforward on what's been provided. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Dave?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. Not really, unless there's some specific questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Graham. I'm just really happy to have this laid out. This crystallizes exactly what our costs are. So, thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the only comment that I would make is that, I think from a staff perspective, we understand why you're asking these particular questions. You want to make sure we're looking at the cost-benefit analysis on all of these. And so, I think, what you see here before you is that analysis as it relates to this particular vehicle comparison. But I know over the last number of days, I've reached out to some of my counterparts in other municipalities and looking at how their life cycling and how those life cycle costs, work in other municipalities. Are there benchmarks that are set? Are there typical industry standards? And I've shared that with Director Graham. So, we're going to continue looking at life cycle costing, and as it relates to items like lawnmowers and things like that, ensure that we're reaching out to frontline staff when we get to the point of purchase to make sure that what we're purchasing is actually the appropriate piece of equipment.
And finally, the report that we got from Mishka concerning the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce and some comments towards us as we're going into budget. Mr. Koppoulos?
Through Mr. Chairman, I think the letter is fairly self-explanatory. I think what the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce wanted to share with us is some of the inputs and data that they've received through the very broad-based survey that they did of their memberships and of businesses, and it focuses specifically around economic development, being an important driver for this region, for the Niagara region as a whole, and how that is their focus. And they're doing similar advocacy with the regional government as well as other municipalities that they see, economic development activity happening.
Okay, so that's the end of these reports. It's 25 after 11. Let's do a quick break, and then we'll start into the nuts and bolts of the items. Let's reconvene at 25 to 12.
Mr. Chairman, could I just thank Mr. Kirkopoulos on the staff on behalf of Council for the comprehensive reports and their quick response. Everyone was relevant. I think it's advancing our decision-making capabilities with the details that you've given us, and thank you very much for the time spent over the last couple of days.
And also, thank you for getting some of the information out ahead of this meeting. I really appreciate that, being able to look at before we get here.
Yep. Okay, quick break.
So it's actually more.
That was so funny.
Is this number correct here?
500. Yeah, you know what?